Chapter 15. Abby. DJ had a long time to think by the time two more FBI agents showed up in his room, and he had come to a few conclusions, none of which had anything good in store for him. For one thing, he was likely going to be charged with murder. After all, he had ample opportunity to flee when he had killed the five guys at the entrance to his canyon. Instead, he chose to march back to his house and attack the others. Some states have what they call stand your ground law that affords protections to those that defend themselves with a gun. It basically says that if a chance to retreat presents itself, you're not required by law to take it. You don't have to run. Colorado was not a state that had this law. According to their law, if you can run away, you are required to. State prosecution history suggested that this was rarely enforced, but DJ's situation was a far cry above the norm. Understanding the law as it pertained to guns and self-defense was something that had been covered in his concealed carry class. It was required in order to obtain a gun permit. That was one reason that DJ was in trouble, and why he was confined to this clinic and being watched by two deputies. Additionally, he now knew who Soul Patch was. Mason Kaiser was the son of the biggest crime boss in the state, and probably a few others as well. He had learned this when the first two FBI agents came to visit. They called him Big Chuck. That was the second reason he knew he was in trouble. Big Chuck was going to be a little ticked that DJ had killed his son. He probably wasn't going to just let it go. Big Chuck would send someone to kill him. Again. Either here or in jail, but he would definitely make another attempt on his life. DJ was certain of it. The first set of FBI agents had asked him a bunch of questions and made him tell his story twice. Not willing to volunteer anything to help prosecutors push a case against him, he had intentionally lied about how he had killed them all and the order in which it had happened, saying instead that he simply could not remember much of the details, blaming it all on his concussion. He wasn't sure how much defense he would be afforded due to the concussion he had been diagnosed with, but it was his only strategy at the moment. When they left, they handcuffed him to his hospital bed, which was the third and final reason that he was in trouble. From the line of questioning he had received from the first set of agents, he was sure that they thought he might actually be connected to the Kaiser crime family, and that was why he was shackled to the bed. Now here was a second set of agents to ask him even more questions. This must be the A-team, he thought. These were the ones who would wring the truth out of him. He sat up in bed a bit and tried pulling the stupid hospital gown he was wearing around him even more. His clothes had been taken from him because they were now considered evidence. All he had to cover himself was this idiotic robe. In the age of modern medicine, you would think that they would come up with a clothing choice that allowed you to retain some of your dignity, he thought. The first agent to enter was obviously the one in charge. He seemed entirely sure of himself and was older, maybe late 30s or early 40s. The second, with the high and tight haircut, seemed awkward and a little nervous. It was easy to peg the second man as the rookie. "Hello, Mr. Slaughter. I'm Agent Foster, and this is Agent Ainsley. I know you've already been asked a million questions, but I've got a few more for you." He zeroed in on the bandage wrapped around DJ's head and pointed. "What happened there?" DJ looked at him with slight contempt and said, "I was shot in the head." Agent Foster winced at the notion. "Ouch! How are you not dead?" DJ pointed at his head with his free hand. "Steel plate. Got it in Iraq." Deflected the bullet. Brett nodded and then continued. "Lucky. How many stitches?" DJ shook his head. "None yet. The wound is still open. They're scheduled to take me to an actual hospital this afternoon for an MRI, and to make sure they don't need to replace the plate." "So that's how you got your concussion?" "No." DJ tilted his head to one side and looked at him from frustration. "I got the concussion from telling the same story 3 times, once to the sheriff and twice to the FBI, and now here you come wanting me to tell you the story again. Well, you and your monkey in training here," he gestured at Agent Ainsley, "can turn your little suits around and go back to wherever you came from. I'm done telling the same story." Agent Foster nodded before continuing. "You sure you want me to leave? Because I have no intention of making you tell the same story all over again. In fact, I'm not even attached to the other group that you already talked to. I'm here because I came to help you out." Agent Foster appeared to think about it a moment and then, "Maybe." DJ stared at him for a second. Well, that made him a little curious. He was sure that this was some sort of tactic, of course, but now he kind of wanted to see where this was going. He finally spoke up. "Okay, Mulder, just exactly how can you help me out?" Agent Foster laughed out loud and turned to the young man standing next to him. "Did you hear that, Marine? He called me Mulder." He turned back to DJ. "You know, that was pretty funny. 10 years in the FBI, and I have never heard that before. First time ever." He shook his head in mock amazement. "X-Files reference. Funny stuff." Agent Ainsley spoke up. What's a Mulder?" Both men gave Ainsley a dead-eyed look. Agent Foster turned back to DJ and then asked, "You see what I have to work with? I tell you what, I can see you're cranky, what with being shot in the head and all. I get it, I totally do. So before this escalates further and I do something I'll probably regret, like grab you by your fuzzy face and shake the teeth out of your head, I'm going to leave you for a few hours. You see, I was in Dallas working another case when I got called to come deal with you. I've been awake entirely too long and I'm starving to death, so I'm going to go check into this little motel I saw, and then I'm going to stop by this nice little diner on the edge of town and get a bite to eat. Oh, wait, I can't eat at that diner, 'cause somebody killed the owner." He ended, shouting at him and pointing a finger in the direction of the diner down the road. He turned and stormed out of the room, with the shocked Agent Ainsley hastily following behind. DJ could hear him agitatedly ask a deputy in the hallway what time he was supposed to be transferred. The deputy told him they were going to take him themselves around 3 p.m. after a final exam by the person in charge. Agent Foster barked at the deputy. "I'll be back then. Don't transfer him until I get back." Unlike the other agents DJ talked to, this guy was different. If it weren't for the fact that he was likely going to throw him in a prison somewhere, DJ might have liked him. He was a little ticked at the agent because the man said he was going to get something to eat, and DJ was famished. He had not eaten since yesterday morning, and he was feeling sick to his stomach. Likely not from the concussion, but more from lack of food. He hit the call button attached to the bed. After a minute, the nurse responded by coming into the room. He gave her a pleading look. "I'll give you $1,000 if you find me a sandwich," he desperately offered. Chapter break. At roughly 2 p.m., the clinic's only worker, a registered nurse, came in and checked DJ over and pronounced him fit for travel. Since he still had no clothes, she had given him a set of blue scrubs and a pair of one-size-fits-all hospital slippers. He now only had to wait for Agent Foster and his sidekick to come and present his offer of help, whatever that meant. Somewhere in the middle of that wait, a tall, slender young woman stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. She had a naturally tanned complexion with a tight black ponytail pulled back behind her. She paused at the door, and her hazel eyes searched him over like she was trying to make up her mind about him. She was dressed in some of those stretchy jean things that looked like jeans but functioned more like yoga pants. She wore a gray tank top that clung tightly to her, and she looked like she had a runner's body. She was sporting a small black purse with a strap crisscrossing over her torso, like one might wear to keep people from snatching it and running off, although she looked like she could run down anyone that tried. She was even wearing running shoes to further enhance that look. Gripped tightly in her hands was a white disposable food container, the kind you might take leftovers home in from a restaurant. She stood there looking at him, with little expression on her face. He stared back. She was too young for him, obviously in her early 20s, but he found her to be quite attractive. Finally, he could take the silence no longer. "Is there something I can do for you?" She snapped out of her thoughts and replied, "My name is Abby," she answered, "Abby Jackson. Henry was my father." He bolted to his feet from the bed, the handcuffs yanking on his arms and keeping him from going further. I'm so sorry for your loss," he said. "Henry was a good man. He talked about you all the time. Your dad saved my life. He stopped talking. He suddenly had no more words. What could he say? There was nothing he could say or do to bring back her dad. So instead, he just stood there like an idiot, his brain clawing for words, but his speech escaping him. She turned her head and looked at the door as if she could see the deputies outside. "I know both of the deputies out front," she spoke. "I went to school with both of them. They're brothers, you know. They said it was possible that you might have something to do with my father's death. They told me I should leave, that I should leave this to the FBI to sort through. I reminded them that I caught them stealing my underwear off a clothesline when they were 8 or 9. I beat them half to death with an umbrella back then. I said I would repeat that if they didn't move out of my way now. And now, I'm standing here in front of you, and I want to know the truth. Did you have anything to do with my father's death?" DJ began to stammer. I, um, well, I guess I did." He dropped his gaze to the floor in shame, but not before he saw the fire that began to spark and pop in her eyes. "Explain," she said. There was a sudden hard edge to her voice. DJ paused to gather his thoughts before speaking, but continued to look at the floor. At the moment, he simply could not look her in the eye. I collect guns. It's my hobby," he began. "The men that did what they did, they showed me pictures of a few that I wanted to add to my collection. I arranged to meet them in a public location, but it was a setup. They jumped me. Your dad tried to intervene. He saved my life. Had I chosen another location with more people, or had I chosen a busier time of day, or if I would have just paid closer attention to what was going on, then your father would be alive today. I promise you, if I could take his place, I would." DJ stopped and waited for her to make the next move. If she chose to cuss him out, he was going to take it. If she chose to beat him to death with an umbrella, he was going to take it. He knew what it was like to lose people you're crazy about, and he would do anything to spare her from those feelings. He watched as water drops fell to the floor to splatter on his hospital slippers. For a second, he did not understand what was going on. Where was the water coming from? And then he realized. He was crying. All at once she was there, close, hugging him, embracing the pain away. For a moment he resisted her, but then he just let go and held on to her too as they both shed tears. For a long moment, they just clung to each other, each finding comfort in the other's embrace. It wasn't intimate in any way, despite how attractive he found her. It was just soothing. It was a small bubble of quiet, temporary peace in a sea of hurt. After a time, she finally pulled away from him and wiped her eyes on the back of her hand. She held out the white container. "My dad told me you liked his pan-fried trout. I stopped by the diner on the way here. It's probably not as good as he makes, but..." She gave a weak smile. He sat on the bed and broke it open with his free hand eagerly. Feeling like a kid at Christmas, he discovered 2 fish fillets and some home fries along with the small plastic containers of ketchup and tartar sauce. He dove in with one hand and devoured it in hungry gulps. Despite his repeated pleas for someone to bring him something to eat, the small facility was just not equipped for long stays that would require food service to be provided to patients. The deputies were on orders to stay put, so they could not go get anything, and the rest of their small force only consisted of one other deputy and the sheriff himself. Plus, they were all still working his case. He was sure the 2 young men outside were nearly as hungry as he. The one nurse had finally given him an apple she brought from home for a snack around noon. It wasn't enough, but at least it had been something. But this was real food, and he inhaled it with great enthusiasm. Abby must be a trusting person, he thought to himself. The type of person that always saw the best in things. Otherwise, she would have never went through the trouble of preparing a meal for the man that may have been responsible for the murder of her father. It was refreshing. In his growing cynicism of the world, he thought people like this were a dying breed. He suddenly realized what he must look like to Abby, standing there eating like a caveman. He stopped and looked up at her. Covering his full mouth with his free hand, he made a sheepish attempt to explain his behavior. "I haven't eaten anything since yesterday morning," he said. She held her hands up, palms out, and shook her head. "No worries. At least I know you won't care how bad my cooking may be." She excused herself and stepped into the bathroom to freshen up. He nodded his head and busied himself with consuming the rest of the contents of the container. 2 seconds later, the room door opened again. In walked Agent Foster and his sidekick. DJ did not pause in his eating, merely watched them enter. Agent Ainsley paused in the open door and addressed the 2 deputies sitting in the chairs out front. "We're going to be here a few minutes, so why don't you guys go get something to eat?" Both deputies wasted no time in taking him up on his offer and quickly stood up to leave. Agent Foster turned towards Ainsley and seemed to consider that. For a second, DJ thought the agent was going to protest. Finally, the senior agent nodded and turned his attention back to DJ, who was now licking his fingers from having finished the entire box. Agent Foster moved to sit in the chair next to his bed, while Ainsley moved over by the bathroom door on the opposite side of the room. DJ watched the room door slowly swing closed. They were now alone. Now, maybe DJ would learn what this Foster character was up to. DJ suddenly remembered that Abby was still in the bathroom. He saw the bathroom door open just a sliver and imagined she was probably listening to see what she could learn. Listening to see if her instincts were right about him not being a criminal somehow involved with her father's death. DJ decided to not alert the agents and let her listen in. He had nothing to hide from her. Agent Foster began. "Okay, let's see if we can start this off on a better note this time. I apologize for snapping at you like that. I've had me a good nap now and found the biggest burger this town had to offer. Let's just say I'm in a much better mood." Agent Ainsley had pulled out a phone and was trying to discreetly answer a text. DJ just shrugged. This was Agent Foster's show. He was just here to watch, so he said nothing. Agent Foster continued. "You see, my boss seems to think you're some kind of elite hitman. You have a lot of money. You live in a remote location. You have very little contact with the outside world. No family. And despite the fact that you have no real combat training or experience, you can somehow shoot like a Hollywood action hero. I mean, you killed 22 guys. Do you know how seriously awesome that is?" DJ shrugged. "It would have been 23, but the last one got away." Brett nodded. Right. You gave us a description. So you missed one. No one's perfect, right?" Before responding, DJ glanced over at Agent Ainsley, still tapping away on his phone, seemingly not paying attention at all. "So do you guys have any computers at the FBI? Anything connected to the internet?" he sarcastically asked. "Because anybody at the FBI should be able to pull up the report of my family getting killed. It would be an easy leap to figure out why I live such a secluded lifestyle. I don't like people." He glared at the agent. "How I made my money should be no secret either." Agent Foster nodded. You see, that's just it. It's a perfect background. We did check you out. Thoroughly. I mean, if it's a fake background, it's one of the best ones I've ever seen. But then you have to admit how it would look to someone in my profession, right? I mean, to people like me, it looks like you got into the contract killing business and made someone mad. They kill your family and make you watch. Then they're going to kill you. But you happen to luck out with the cops showing up just in time. You can't give up killing because you're obviously good at it. So you pull a job for Big Chuck. But you either blow it so he wants you dead, or he decides he needs to tie up loose ends. Either way, he sends his son to do it. But you get away courtesy of the diner owner. You lead them back to your place where you'll get some of the mini guns you have hidden behind a fake wall and show them who's boss. They call in their private hit squad thinking 23 against 1 is pretty good odds. But they don't know that you're really the reincarnation of John Wayne. So you take them all out. Well, all of them but one. And that leads me to how I can help you out," he concluded. DJ shook his head. "That's an interesting theory," he admitted. "Might make for a good movie. After all, it's fiction. But I'll bite. Just how do you think you can help me out?" Brett replied, "Well, if you admit to being a high-level hitman and provide us some good intel that will put some seriously scary people away, we can work a deal out where you get to stay out of jail and get put into witness protection. Say the word, and I can have federal marshals here in an hour." DJ acted like he was really considering that for a moment, then said, "One problem with that. I have no evidence to turn over because I'm not a hitman. Oh, trust me, if I was, I'd be rolling over like a puppy needing its belly scratched. Witness protection sounds awesome, because as soon as the state of Colorado prosecutes me for not trying to run away when I had the chance, and instead choosing to kill every last one of Big Chuck's private army, not to mention putting a son down like the dog he was, you and I both know that this is only a matter of time before I get a shiv in my ribs in a prison shower." Agent Foster stood up and crossed his arms to look at him. There was a long pause then, before he said, "I believe you." DJ was shocked. "You do?" "Yeah, I do. You see, I got this assignment because I'm good at putting pieces of puzzles together. I have a knack for seeing through the fog and pulling out the truth in a situation. And I was starting to have my doubts about our initial suspicions. But you just confirmed it. A contract killer would have jumped all over at my offer just then. Maybe not at first, but I would have been able to look into your eyes and tell that you were going to. Because you're correct. If you go to jail, no matter who you are, you're probably going to die. Big Chuck's reach is just too great. Going into hiding is not only the smartest thing to do, but it would give you the opportunity to run away from the feds. You go right back into contract killing. Probably go right after the guy that got you into all of this, trying to kill Big Chuck. It's a no-brainer. An honest man, however, possessing no intel on anyone to give up, has no choice but to risk prison. An honest man can't even make something up to wedge himself into the deal. You just have nothing to offer. So just purely from a logistical standpoint, I believe you. I can tell you're smart enough to put all that together fast enough to give me a quick answer, too. But despite that, my superpowered agent skills are telling me that you're being truthful. But you're still in trouble. And I'm not sure I can help at all if you really aren't a hired hitman. Because I'm wondering if you will even make it to the prison to get a shiv in the shower. I think Big Chuck is going to try to take you out sooner rather than later. After all, if you go into the system, there's no guarantee that you'll end up at a prison where he has contacts. Agent Foster then turned to look at his partner still tapping away on his phone. I'm wondering if former Marine Agent Brian Ainsley here could give us any information on that. The tapping stopped, and Ainsley looked up, seemingly confused. Sir? Brett continued. You know, Agent, if you're going to take money from a mob boss, you probably shouldn't buy a $5,000 watch and wear it to work. Agent Foster gave him a knowing look. The phone vibrated in Ainsley's hand, and he looked down to read the message. A look of incredulity washed over Agent Foster's face before he said, I just accused you of being a mole for the mob. Is that text message really so important right now? Agent Ainsley finally looked up from his chat session. I was just given orders, he said. What orders? Brett asked angrily. The young agent stepped forward, drew his weapon at the same time, and pointed right at Agent Foster. Hands up and turn around. The senior agent turned around to face DJ slowly, lifting his hands in the universal symbol of surrender. What you doing, Marine? Ainsley stuttered. Sorry, sir. I didn't want it to go this way. I was only supposed to provide intel occasionally. Look up stuff on the computer and inform them of things. No one was ever supposed to get hurt. But Big Chuck really wants this guy dead. So you're going to kill a fellow agent and an innocent man? Agent Foster asked in a smooth, even voice. No, sir. I'm just supposed to make you stand down. Some of his men just pulled up in the parking lot. You're going to come take him away. They said if I didn't do this, they would kill my mom. DJ turned his attention to the parking lot through the window. He could indeed see another car that hadn't been there before, but it was already empty. Whoever had got out of it would be here any second. Brett began to try and reason with him. Think this through, Marine. They aren't just going to let the rest of us go. They're going to kill you and me both. It's not too late to stop this. It was then that the bathroom door opened and Abby shot forward from her concealment. Agent Ainsley heard the movement from behind him and tried to turn to face whoever was there. That is when DJ saw the coolest thing ever. Abby did a roundhouse kick and slammed the toe of her running shoe hard against Ainsley's temple. His head snapped around, and he went out like a light, his gun falling to the floor from lifeless fingers. She righted herself and struck the sexiest fighter stance he had ever seen. For a moment, both of the remaining men could only stare at her. Then, with his hands still up in the surrender pose, Agent Foster turned to look at DJ and asked, who is she? DJ answered with the first sarcastic thing that came to his mind. Shrugging his shoulders, he said, I always keep a ninja in the bathroom in case things go bad.